Welcome to The Longer Game. If you're listening to a show about retail being reimagined. If you'd like to connect with The Longer Game, look for The Longer Game at thelongergame.com and on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn at The Longer Game. We're here to talk about retail, why it's changing, how it's changing, and what you can expect in the future. We're not trying to take ourselves too seriously, but we do want to know what that retail landscape is going to look like. I hope you enjoy your time listening to this podcast. We try to keep it as quick as possible because we don't want to waste your time, but we want to keep you informed. Thanks for tuning in. Now, here's the show. All right, welcome everybody to The Longer Game, where we talk about retail. The tagline is Retail Reimagined. We like to look at what the future of retail is going to look like. So we talk about what it's doing now and how we think it's going to evolve into the future. Today, I have with me Destaney Wishon. She is a founder and the CEO. She's the boss lady at Better AMS. Welcome to the show.
Of
Thanks for
course.
coming
Thank
on.
you so much for having me. I've been waiting on this one. It's been a while figuring out our schedules, but we are here.
We're here, and you're almost about to. There's a big Amazon show that's coming up next week. Almost this week, and you're leaving in a couple hours to go to get ready for Prosper and to go there.
It is the biggest show of the year so far, I think. So I'm really excited. We've already had a ton of messages about brands being there, but the last minute stress of packing and getting ready and balancing work is a lot. So
Yeah, you seem you are definitely a worker bee. Like you're on it. Like I feel like 24/7. I mean, that's what I see.
I have nothing better to do, especially in winter. So Bentonville gets pretty cold in the winter, and I don't like leaving the house.
Okay.
So
So you're just telling. I mean, I think one of the things about you are the CEO. I'm the CEO, but I call myself the chief idea officer. It was honestly just something a branding guy I worked with came up with, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm going to use that, and it really doesn't mean anything because it's just a title. But when you are owning and running a business, it's so easy to work. Like it, especially if you have a strong work ethic, which I know that you do. It's so easy to work and just keep going and just keep going and pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's honestly probably why you've seen so much success in your business and so much growth in your business, because you've invested a lot of time in it. So, I mean, like, I feel like when people think about, honestly, before the pandemic, when people think about, oh, work from home or work remotely, they're like, yeah, I can just watch TV and do whatever. And I'm like, no, I actually want my business to grow. I want it to be successful. So I'm going to invest time in it. Did you ever get that from people before the pandemic? Like, oh, working remotely, like that must be cool.
100%. I get working remotely, being able to take off whenever you want, and travel. Those are the three things that always come up in conversation. I'm like, I work 24/7. I rarely leave the house. When I travel, it's for work, and it adds up. I mean, it takes a toll for sure. Wouldn't change it for anything, but it's risk and reward. It's not one sided.
Oh, for sure. One of the things that I have a tendency to just like go. And honestly, it's if it's uh if it's work, like I'll just keep going, keep working, like, oh, just one more thing, just one more thing. And my daughter is 9 now. I had to get better about not just saying just one more thing and saying, all right, like I'm gonna shut it down for the day because I do want to see my family. I want to spend time with my family, even if they're in the other room and I'm in here working. But sometimes even in the same room, just being there, I'm working. And so there's like a little bit of connectivity there.
Yeah.
But I had to get a lot better at saying no to work um because I actually wanted to see my family. Now there have been times where when I've been building something where I just didn't see them, and it was like, this is just a sacrifice. It's just part of building a business. Everything I've built, I've always been doing something else full time. So like when I first got started in e-commerce, I was managing a Starbucks, and I just hated it. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to get out of it. And I had already sold music equipment on eBay. And so I knew and understood how it worked. But I had a friend who was doing, um, he was selling on eBay and Amazon, and was a reseller. That was, before there were any ads, everything was just all organic. Like now I think back and I'm like, how did that even happen? Like you just try to get white pictures. Some of them were
Yep.
not, on totally white backgrounds. And then organic, like SEO, like
Yes.
that just seems so crazy now, knowing how, I mean, obviously you're running an ad agency, but like my agency is super advertising focused as well. And that was the thing that I did before I started really focusing on building the agency and having to step away from some of the client facing stuff.
Yep.
And it just seems crazy now to think back, like, oh my gosh, it was all organic. Um, but yeah, I worked a full-time job while I sold on eBay, did that for a year, then left, pursue entrepreneurship full time. 2016, my business kind of crashed. Well, not kind of crashed, it did crash. And I was like, shit, what am I going to do? So I got another job while I figured out, okay, I was like, I'm going to start doing some consulting and freelancing and see what happens. And I went really broad at first, e-commerce wise, because I had some different experiences and just
Yeah.
saw Amazon was a huge opportunity. And so, just went all in and I started building an agency before I even knew I was. Like I just hired someone under me, trained them
Nice.
how to process, and then it grew from there. But yeah, I mean but like that year where I was building the agency and working somewhere else, I was working a full-time job, and then I would come home and I do all my freelance and consulting stuff. And so I basically didn't see my family for a year. um, I would drink like a couple beers every night while I was working consulting, and it was like good craft beer, so I put on a good amount of weight. um, that I was finally able to get back off. But I mean, yeah, it can be very stressful
Yeah.
with the building of something, because it's relying upon you.
Yep. 100%. Something that I don't think necessarily helps is we are in this e-commerce boom. I mean, COVID can be argued was a catalyst for a change in
Oh yeah.
consumer habits. And then on the brand side, we saw a lot of budget shift from retail to .com, a lot of decisions being made when foot traffic dropped. So if you're on LinkedIn or if you're looking what all of your peers in the space are doing, it's every day there's another round of money being raised, or there's another acquisition in the space, or there's another brand doing this or that or this. And when you keep up with it, it can be this constant rat race of just trying to get to the next level, trying to keep up with everyone else. And I think that's really important to call out in e-commerce right now because it's the hot thing that everyone's wanting to take part in. So you just have to realize what you're doing and what you're capable of and sit back and decide what you want. Because if you don't want to be a part of that, then the 70-hour work weeks and doing everything it takes may not be for you. You should sit down and decide maybe I want a lifestyle company or maybe I want a performance based company. And all of those things are really
Yeah.
going to be derivative from the founder. Because if you have a founder that works 80 hours a week, it's going to be really hard to have a culture of people who work 40 hours a week. So that's kind of something we had to get really aligned on.
Yeah, well, that's good that you guys at least talked about that and set expectations, um, you know, about what you wanted to be. And I think uh, I'm thinking now about, as my agency evolves, some of the founding principles are things we bring people through when they onboard. Like, here's who we are as a
Mhm.
company. Here's this stuff. Some of that stuff
Yes.
has changed, and it's or I'm just like, hey, I have a better idea of who we really are as a company. So I want to make sure that people know that going in. And so we have like some, founding pillars, and it's kind of basic stuff like honesty, communication, stuff like that. Communication is one of the biggest things. That's anytime someone has really not worked out on our
Yeah.
team, it's been they just didn't communicate well. And
Yeah.
especially being remote, I don't need to micromanage you, but I need to know that you did, these three things, and that you're working on the next couple of things that are coming up. You do them how you need to do them, because I trust you, because that's why you're in that spot. But you have to communicate. If you don't communicate, it can make it really hard for me to know. I'm assuming you got it, and then I come back a week later and it's like, oh, you didn't even touch that. Like, what? Why didn't you say anything?
Yeah. 100%. I think another catalyst of the environment we work in is flexibility. I
Yeah.
assume that 60 to 70 years ago, jobs were a lot more operational because the industry didn't change near as quickly as what it is now. Right now, Amazon can make one change that could completely change the projection of so many brands and so many agencies, and they're able to pass that down really quickly and force industry change because of their dev team.
Yeah.
So things like that cause us to have to be so much more flexible to be able to kind of maneuver. So if we just have strictly an operational focused agency, we're always going to be a little bit behind. So we had to really sit down and figure out what that looked like expectation wise on people we're hiring, because there's people that are really good at following processes, and there's people that are really good at making their own decisions with context. So we still
Mhm.
are very big believers in SOPs and building out
Oh, yeah.
processes, but you need people who can take that context and then make their own decisions. Because truly, I mean, there's been days where we've like woken up and Amazon's made some for a change, like, wow, this is going to really drastically affect everything we're doing. Supply chain, that was another big indicator. Everyone who is relying on
Yeah.
their day-to-day systems and forecasting, they continue to rely on that. They were SOL. Like, you need people that can think really quickly and just be much more flexible in this industry.
I think that's a very sage thing to say, and I think you're right that you have to be able to be flexible. And honestly, I think being on the service side of things, there's I feel like it's a little bit more honestly job security. Like when Amazon changes something or they do something, if you're able to adapt and learn it, you're able to help brands better.
Yep.
The companies that like I feel bad for a lot of the SaaS companies out there who sometimes Amazon could just change something and it totally eliminates their business. And it's like, okay,
Yes.
like you didn't know this was going to happen, or Amazon releases something, changes the way the API is hooked up, and so
Yep.
people's software stop working, and they're like, okay, we got to fix
Yep.
this thing, and people are complaining about it, and it's like they don't get any warning, even though they might be on the Amazon Developer Council, they're still not getting the inside scoop on stuff.
100%. Another area we see that in is on the brand side. Retailers were typically a lot more bureaucratic, especially when you're looking at the OGs in the space like Walmart, where they have a lot of different buyers that are within the process before any decisions made. Amazon's not like this.
Right.
They're very siloed with their internal teams. And I mean, we see it on the ad side. A product team will roll something out that the partner reps don't really know anything about. Like, Amazon just
Yeah.
pushes that concept across their teams without getting into what it looks like to work within Amazon. But on the brand side, they sometimes don't know how to keep up. So when we're working with some of the largest like CPG brands who come from retail, it's like, no,
Yeah.
you're going to need to move a lot quicker than that. We shouldn't need to have this 7-week approval process to get this pushed through, because that's 7 weeks of private
Right.
label advantage. Like, and 7 weeks is a short period. I mean, even just on closing deal cycles, it takes a long time to get things done over there. E-commerce moves way too quick. All these other brands are getting a major competitive advantage over them when that happens.
How reticent are you seeing some of these, bigger CPG brands be to that need to change, and how many of them are actually saying like, okay, we can change, we can do that? Because I've seen a lot of resistance, and it's hard, especially when you're going from like if someone's moving from vendor central to seller central, they're moving from 1P to 3P. It's hard for them to start saying no to purchase orders because they're so used to doing that. Or if they're dealing with problems with people selling to distributors who are then selling their products on Amazon, and they're like, we don't want anybody else selling on Amazon but ourselves. Um, it's hard for them to turn off sales to distributor because that's revenue that's coming in. But it's like it's totally about the future. It's about the long game. You're going to start getting retail, and you're going to start owning that marketplace. So how many
Yep.
of them that you feel like you're working with are you actually seeing change?
On the micro level, I think it's turned into a game of education. There's so much lack
Yeah.
of education and true understanding about how to work the platform. So, as you mentioned, we're seeing that pretty frequently where there's a lot of resistance to change because they have assumptions on how the platform works. So we're having to sit down and fully educate. This is why this matters. This is why you need to do this. And it takes a lot of time. And I think that's where there's a
Yeah.
shortage of people to truly educate the market on these things. So I think that's what needs to change first and foremost on the micro level in order to get people more acceptance to the risk that's going to happen when you do make a transition like that. Even on the ad side, it's very similar. We have to explain why you want to lower ROAS on certain terms and why you want to higher ROAS and have
Right.
expectations on branded. On the macro level, though, I think it's going to cause there's got to be a shift in organizational change. I mean, we have
Yeah.
worked with brands that have placed really awesome e-commerce talent. They know what needs to happen. They're great to work with, but then they go to their board members and their board members are like, well, we can't handle that ROAS on the platform. And I'm like, you're buying billboards. You're spending,
Yeah.
hundred
You have
thousand
no
dollars a
idea what
month.
that's getting you.
Yes, on OTT or billboard, and you're not willing to see a $2
Yeah.
ROAS on your number one keyword, which is going to influence your organic rank. Which is, again, we've got to go back to the micro of education and why they need to do that. But it's going to cause a really big shift in the industry. And if people don't start paying better, there's such a shortage in talent that I think that's causing even higher issue or higher churn rate, bigger issue on the brand side.
You think that you're saying there's more churn internally on the brand side?
Yes, I don't think they can be as competitive as the money that's being moved into the agency side, the SaaS side, the aggregator side.
Gotcha.
There's a major talent shortage. And I've heard that argued across the board, but I truly don't think there's enough people who truly understand the platform well enough. And then when you're getting these really, really high salary asks, they're causing this crazy shift in where people want to work.
Yeah. So I couldn't agree with you more. And what's interesting is I and I don't think it's a brag if something's the truth, and or even if it is a brag, if it's the truth. Like, I'm very confident in myself and my agency's capability to perform, and we've got case studies to prove it. I know you have seen great success with your clients. So when you can go confidently into a situation and say, hey, like, I know this space very well. I know it, and the results that what brands we work with showcases
Mhm.
that. It's and I, but I even know all the other people who are really good at it too. So I
Yeah.
talk to prospects, and I just say, one of the biggest things that, as these big retail brands start to pay attention to Amazon, and I honestly think a lot of some of the bigger CPG companies looked at it as, well, who cares if we add another 20 million of revenue
Yeah.
onto our brand. We're focusing on what's going to get us, you know, over a billion or 2 billion or whatever the case might be. And then Amazon turned into, like you said, people don't know what Amazon is. It's not just a marketplace, it's a product search engine. It is a brand qualifier. People will go and look and say, is this brand good quality? Because
Yes.
if they're not, I don't want to buy their product. And they could be in a Target, or they could be
Yep.
on the person's website, and you say, well, I want to go check Amazon to see what's there. And if they're not there, they're not represented well, then that's changing brand perception and, losing brand equity. So that I think was a huge shift for people, and they're still kind of adjusting to that. But yeah, I feel very confident in my skill set. But I tell prospects, I said, even if you don't work with me, you need to work with a guide. Like, you need to have someone
Yeah.
that's working with you. I know like 10 other people that can do it really well, and they're like probably, you know 10 out of 50 or something like that. Like, there's thousands of people in the space, but the people who, and I would say, from there's a lot of people who can do different tasks relating to Amazon, and they can do those tasks well. But when it comes to knowing and understanding the platform, creating strategy, and executing on that strategy, that's a very rare breed. There's a lot of people who have maybe worked higher up at CPG companies, and they knew that Amazon was a big part of what they were doing. They know, okay, well, we need to do this and that, but they don't actually know how to go out and execute. So putting
Yeah.
those three things together, the knowledge of the space, creating strategy and execution, like those, I've heard people say unicorn. That's not my term. But I've heard people say, that essentially there's such a small handful of people that can do that. And now there's so much money that's entering into this Amazon e-commerce digital space that you're saying they were seeing this need for talent, and it's not where it needs to be.
It's a really fun combination of having to have that skill set of all three, right? You have to be really, really good at every
Yeah.
aspect of Amazon. And then you combine it with the entrepreneurial challenges of making sure you're having an
Oh
amazing
yeah.
culture. Because there's so much opportunity in this space, you can say yes to every single brand, and before you know it, your people are burned out and you see churn. That's a major issue we're seeing.
Mhm.
Number two is paying your people well. That can be really hard. Marginally,
Yeah.
as a startup, you're constantly in this space of like hiring someone, filling their capacity, having a little bit more profit to move forward. But as we're seeing across the board, margins are decreasing for brands, they're also decreasing for agencies. Like there's the shortage of
Yeah.
talent. And then you combine it with just like regular difficulties of being an entrepreneur. It's fun. It's an insane space to be in right now. I'm incredibly, incredibly thankful and blessed, but it's definitely not an easy combination having to hit both of those factors because if you want to continue being a thought leader and providing a premium service, you need to have the talent to keep doing it. And if you decide to sacrifice
Yeah.
one or the other, it's just things go downhill fast. And that's what we're seeing because it's such a seller's market that anyone can start an agency and say they know Amazon.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody can say, and then, if they've been like kind of doing something, um, they can like, say, hey, I've been doing this since 2014, but really what you've been doing, you haven't really been doing it for, maybe the past year or two. And I think the aggregators coming into the space has been interesting, and it's caused a lot of buzz around things that are going on.
Mhm.
But I also have to remember that a lot of the aggregators are coming from the finance world, and so that's a very different world than the Amazon world. And so it's being able to, I think the aggregators that are going to win are the ones who are going to say, hey, we need the people who know what they're doing to really come in and do it, and we just make sure that we're you know getting healthy margins on what we're doing, and that we're acquiring the right talent, we're doing all that stuff. Or I mean, eventually, I think one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur and being a smaller business, um, and small business could mean you're doing 20 million. Like that's not a big
Yeah.
business by the world's standards or e-commerce standards, but
Yep.
we're not doing 20 million. That would be cool, but that's not what we're doing. But being a smaller business, you have to build out all the processes, you have to build out all the things yourself. And some of the bigger organizations are able to say, well, we've got this thing built because we paid someone to create this whole thing, and you're out there, and this is very much part of my personality. It's just getting out there, out front, it's a little messy, figuring things out, and then turning it over to people on my team so that they can perfect it and build it into a system. And I'm just continuing to make headway going out. But I mean, it's interesting because you're having to create all the resources that are going to help train people and do education for people.
Yeah. 100%. And that differentiation in what aggregators doing is spot on. I think right now it's a model there. It was assumed that you could go in and send products basically through this optimization machine and they would come out on the other end much, much better. But I think they're all starting to realize that, wow, there's differences across categories, or wow,
Mm-hmm.
you really need to understand what made a brand successful. You need to dive into the audience before making optimizations and changes. And that does, it requires specialty talent. And like you said, on the agency side, what we're always looking to do is just look at my biggest weaknesses. Number one is operations. So thankfully, Taylor and I met because that's Taylor's strongest skill set. And then hiring
Okay.
people under us who are just inherently better at us. Then anyone at these certain skill sets. So Alex got brought on board because he's great managing people. Taylor and I don't want to manage people. Like, that's not our
Yeah.
skill set. Like,
Right.
we are
Yeah.
the most like autonomous people in the world. We'll go all day like without checking in on anything. So Alex was brought in. So being able to really know what your strengths are and focus most of your time on them, and then on the flip side, build out a team to support you on your weaknesses is huge.
I think I heard someone say this, someone that was somewhat, I would say, somewhat of a mentor when I was getting going on the agency side of things. And she was just telling me, she had a digital marketing agency. And she said, as you grow, there are certain things that you have to give up. And she's like, there are people on my team that are doing things that I have no clue how to do, but I know that we need to do them. And we need someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to doing that. But there's no way that I can possibly know how to do every single thing. Like you said, hiring people that are better than you. The people on my team who we have what we call a tactical department, and it's really the people that, I mean, it's the backbone of our team, because they're taking all of the reporting from Amazon and turning into our reporting that we give to clients. They're doing all the case management. They're uploading, content optimization, all that kind of stuff. And they, like, some of them are they're based out of the Philippines, but some of them are engineers, and they're like wicked smart people. And I'm like, hey, can you show me how to do that pivot table thing in Excel again? Or how do I do this one thing? Because I'm not a classically trained business person. That was not my my pedigree. My parents were like, we'll support you whatever you want to do, as long as it's not murdering people. And so I had a supportive family. But I truly believe that God has used me as a vessel to say, hey, this guy was not good at business, but look what I've been able to do through him, taking the unlikely and turning it into something that can be effective. And now I can help other people who are starting entrepreneurs and say, hey, like, think about this, remember this. This is really super important. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, there's people on my team that are doing things that I'm like, man, I really need to make sure I hold on to this person, because I do not, I don't want to lose them, because I'm going to have to start filling in on this thing. And I don't want to do it, because I'm probably not going to be that great at it.
Yeah, 100%. That can be really hard to let go of, especially
Yeah.
when in the beginning the business is your baby. It's usually tied to your personal brand. You have some form of association with all of your clients. So every person you hire and every step you take further away from the core of your agency, it's scary. It's scary to put all of that faith of what you've built into another person, even though it's only going to
Yeah.
be 10 to 15% of what you're building. But it's kind of the quote of like, what got you here won't get you there. In the beginning, you're scrappy, you're doing everything, you're trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
Then you get a
Yeah.
little margin, and then you hire someone else. And then you start figuring out how to outsource because you realize your time's not best spent spread thin. It's best spent siloed in these certain aspects. And then you get there, and then you
Yep.
realize you can hire people that are better than you to do things that you come up with and just your idea generation. And that's a cool cycle to go through.
Do you feel like you are like I mean, I didn't realize I was an entrepreneur until a couple of years ago. Seriously, I
Mhm.
just was like, oh, I'm just a small business owner, whatever. And then
Yep.
I look back on my life and I was like, oh my gosh, there were all these things that I did that were very entrepreneurial. And so I'm not a classically trained business person, but I'm definitely an entrepreneur at heart. And it seems like that's very much your spirit as well. Would you say that that's pretty true? That, like, if you look back on everything that you've done, you've had more of an entrepreneurial side to you, like a be scrappy, start something, make it work, and then figure it out from there.
So, two answers. One, if you ask my parents, they'll say yes. I was like the bossiest, most independent child in the world. So they always joke
Okay.
that it makes sense. But I would have, if you would have told me 5 years ago, which I started this 4 years ago, if you would have told me 5 years ago that I'd be the CEO and have 20 employees and be able to travel and just do everything I'm doing, I would have said, hell no. There's no way. I don't think I would want to do it. And I don't think I have the capabilities to do it. Speaking on stage, speaking on podcasts, I would have been like, I don't want to do that. But I
Yeah.
was putting together a presentation on confidence as an entrepreneur for a female group. And what I realized is that when people think of failure, they think if I start this job and take the risk, start this company, and I fail, I lose my job, I lose my house, everything falls apart around me. But that's not how failure is. Failure is these really small steps, and success is the same way. When you decide to start a company, you're not automatically thrown into leading 20 people and doing all these things. It happens
Yep.
in baby steps, and it brings you to where you need to come. Like, I hopped on my first podcast and I figured it out and it wasn't that scary. And then I hopped on my first
Yeah.
webinar with my face. It's like all these little things will occur that make it so less scary. You just have to view success and failure as baby steps instead of just, oh, holy shit, I'm a CEO. Like, it
Right.
evolved. And now I feel like so at home in my role. I truly love every aspect of what I'm doing. It's why I work so much. It's just the most amazing thing ever. But I would have never just jumped into that 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. That's there's a comic called Hannibal. His name is Hannibal Burris, and he's pretty funny. He says this thing, or he has this bit where he says, when everything like starts getting really bad, or like bad things happen, people just start saying cliche things like "take it one day at a time, man." And he's like, isn't that how everybody's been taking it? Like, do you have some kind of weird way that you've been doing like weeks or months at a time? Like you're time traveling? Like, doesn't everyone have to take it a day at a time? But that really
Yep.
is true. You learn, okay, the way that I, handled this person, that was bad, and I need to change that, and I need to make sure that moving forward, I, prepare someone before, I give them bad
Yep.
news or whatever the case might be. So you learn those things as you go, and it really is in baby steps. And the reason people say take it one step at a time is you can't. I mean, like if you're taking two steps, I guess you're hopping. So I guess you could take it two steps at a time, but like you literally have to just put one foot in front of the other one, and that's what leads to the success of building something.
100%. One of the biggest things that got me started was when I got an email to speak on stage, or when someone asked me for an opportunity, I would say yes within the first 5 minutes because I knew if I gave it time, I would talk
Yeah.
myself out of it out of lack of confidence. And it was just answering the emails. And that was my one step at a time, is showing up and answering the emails. And the moment I answered the email, I would do whatever it took to make it successful. But
Yep.
that's a scary moment even in the beginning. It is. It's, you have to take the baby steps. It's showing up, posting the content, it's recording all of your podcasts even if you're only getting 1 to 2 downloads, because it adds up and it takes
Yeah.
time. But
That's
if
the
you're
that's the long game. Build content,
that,
like that is absolutely the long game.
yep,
You like this podcast does not have a ton of subscribers or listeners, but I notice over time, like, of course the earlier episodes are starting to get listened to more, and
yes.
there's more and more people coming, but it's a long game. You have to, hence the name, the longer game. Like you have to start building stuff now and not expect the results to happen right now, but happen over time. And just like that, like I think about businesses that raise a bunch of capital and just start up, and they get really really big, and then maybe they fail. And I think about American Idol, which is weird, but I think about all of
Mhm.
the stars that won that show. A lot
Yeah.
of them did not go on and have successful careers, and it's because they were, some of them were incredible singers, but they didn't take it one step at a time. They didn't slowly build an audience, and then happen to have a hit single, and then they drew in a bigger crowd, but they still had that core audience. And so that's a huge part of building the core essentially. um, and I love that you said you're basically saying yes to things that challenge you or scare you a little bit, and that's been my approach is, hey, I'm not 100% sure how to do this, but I know if I commit to it that I will figure it out. And I'm even willing to spend money or lose money on something if I promise that I'm going to take care of something. And that's why I'm very careful to, like, if I don't think I can get something to you in a week, I'm not going to promise it, or
Yeah.
say I'll get it to you next week. I'm going to say, hey, this might take me a little while. I'm not sure. But I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I don't want to promise, because then I look like a liar, and I don't want to be a liar.
Yep. And that mental model is insane. I think of like some of the moments where I was so scared and I knew I was going to fail. And even when I did fail, it was like 2 hours of being like, well, that was terrible. And then you get over it and you move on.
Yeah.
But in order to know you can overcome failure, you have to fail more. In order to fail more and to have that internal feeling, you have to take bigger risks. So one of the first things I did was went skydiving. This was before I even started as an entrepreneur. I was so scared to skydive, but I was like, let's do it.
Oh,
The build
wow.
up of the 2 hours before it was ridiculous. The feeling inside of me was the worst thing ever. But then you're in a plane for 5 minutes, you jump out and you're done. And that has been like a metaphor for every single thing I've done in my life. I remember moments where I've like broke out in hives because I was so scared to do something.
Yeah.
And then I did it, and then you're done. And then I realized that hour of stress was never worth it. But you don't know that. You don't know how well you can handle failure until you fail more. And in order to fail more, you have to say yes and take bigger risks.
Love that. What do you think for companies out there that are knowing that they're needing to get into e-commerce or get into Amazon? What's their skydiving moment? What do you think they're um, thinking of when it comes to like not getting on Amazon or maybe even trying to figure it out themselves and going without a guide? Like what's their skydiving moment?
You just have to do it. Amazon is recently, I believe, past Walmart is the largest retailer. And what is the risk of not being on there? I think that
Right.
is so much higher than the risk of failure on platform, in all honesty. And I think that's something that people don't realize. Advertising, every single aspect of Amazon, there's very little barrier to entry.
Yeah.
So I would rather lose $5,000 not doing great on the platform, but realize it's not for me, than sit back and watch everyone else succeed on the platform and lose a lot more in the long run. It's the longer game. That's what everyone's got to be after in this space.
Man, that was the best sell of the name of this podcast. I might just take that clip and and play it over and over and over again. Destaney, if people want to find you and talk to you, know more about you, should they look in Mexico? Should they look in Las Vegas? Where if or maybe on the web somewhere? I don't know. How can people get in touch with you and find out more about you and Better AMS?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's probably the best place, easiest to contact me. I have a ton of content there that we just post frequently. If you're interested in learning more about the company, betterams.com. But other than that, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been the longer game where we talk about retail, and I'm thankful to be in a space where there are other people who like we could be vying for potentially business. I mean, I know we're doing content and other things like that. Are you guys doing content optimization and things like that? Okay, so you're very focused on ads.
Yep.
So but at the same time, we could still be going after some of the same business. And I have friends who I call friends who are other agency owners, and I know we bid on the same projects or we put out proposals, and one of them got it or I got it or whatever the case might be. But I feel very blessed to be in a space where there are people who there's still. It seems like there's a camaraderie. It's not as duking it out like other like you think of like the Microsoft and the Apples of the world, like being at each other's, throats. And I feel like and maybe it's just because there's so much opportunity. There's not enough people to take over
A
the
lot of
opportunity.
opportunity.
Maybe as things start to wind down, it will become less like that and become more cutthroat. But yeah, I'm thankful to be in this space. So if you guys want to find Destaney, she said, and by the way, it's Destaney, and it's not Destaney. Don't say that. It's Destaney. I made the mistake of doing that. But go and find her on LinkedIn. She's putting out some interesting content on there. She's talking a lot about advertising. And if you are a brand and you just want to even get your feet wet and know and understand how advertising works on Amazon, you could look at any of her content and it would start to explain things. And again, like she said, taking baby steps, just finding out like, okay, I know that we need to start doing this, and I know how now. I know how this works. Now I need to go find someone who can do it for us. So anyway, that's the show. We don't have an outro. We just say goodbye. So goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Longer Game. We genuinely appreciate your time. And if you want to connect with us, please reach out to thelongergame.com. You can fill out a contact request form there. You can also find us on majority of the social media platforms, except for Twitter. That's the only one that we're not really on. This show is brought to you by my agency, Cartology. We're helping brands accelerate growth and become profitable on Amazon. If you'd like to know more, go to thinkcartology.com, fill out a contact form, and we'll get on the phone. That's what it's all about, connecting with you and building a relationship. This show is also brought to you by Arch DevOps. They're the ones that are helping make all the logistics of this podcast happen. We are so thankful for them. If you want to get your podcast up and running and you want to automate as many things as possible, go to archdevops.com. That's ARCHDEVOPS.com and reach out to them. They can be super, super helpful. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your day and be blessed.